28, you'll see the title that says intercepts and zeros. So intercepts basically is where the graph crosses that particular axis. So like here, the x-intercept is the location where the graph passes the x-axis and where y equals to 0. All right, so if you notice when you're on the x-axis, okay, so this is our x-axis here. When you're on the x-axis, the value of y is going to always be 0. Like for instance, if I ask you what is the coordinate for this point or this point or this point, okay, any of these points along the x-axis, you would say like -1, 0, -2, 0, -3, 0, -4, 0, and so on. So when you are on the x-axis, the value of the y-coordinate will always be 0. Okay, it's going to be just the opposite when you're on the y-axis. X is going to be 0. Okay, and it makes sense. I mean, if you were reading the coordinates on the y, you would say 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4, 0, 5, 0, 6, and so on. Okay. So now we have other names again. Okay, so we have other names for when the line crosses the x-axis. Here they are right here. So the other names for the x-intercept, okay, right here, you see them: root, solution, and 0. So technically there are 3 other names to say x-intercept. So just like we have those alternate names for x is domain, y is range, and so on. So now we have alternate names for when the line crosses the x-axis. So when you're on this x-axis right here, and that line crosses the x-axis right here at 2, 0, that is what we call the x-intercept. Or we could say that is the root, or solution, or 0. Okay, so it has all of those names. Good thing about it, the y-intercept doesn't have any alternate names. We just call it the y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis. Okay, so this one doesn't have any additional names that we have to remember, but this one does. All right. So how do you determine the x and y intercepts? Is really based on the first thing we wrote down right here. So I'm looking where y is 0 in a table or on the graph or in a mapping. If I'm looking for the y-intercept, I'm looking in the column where x is 0. So it's actually a good visual when you have a table. Determining the x and y-intercepts are given in a table of values. So x-intercept, I'm looking where y is 0. So everybody look at the table where y is 0 is right here. I go over and read the x-intercept, which is what? -3. It's that simple. And we're going to write it as -3, 0. Then if I'm looking for the y-intercept, I'm looking for when x is 0. So where does it cross the y-axis, at what number? 4. So you write 0, 4. And it's a good visual. When you have a table, it's not hard to pick them out. So now I'm going to do the x-intercept again. I'm going to look where y is 0, 0, x is 5. Y-intercept, I'm going to look where x is 0. What is y? -2. And then the last one, okay, I'm going to look where y is 0 again and x is -6. And then for the other one, I'm looking where x is 0. Do I actually see where x is 0? And actually there are 2 intercepts on this one because I have here y0 and here's y0. So we're going to write both. So that means this could be a picture of a parabola. You know how you have a parabola and it could cross the x-axis at 2 points. So that could be, you know, something that's crossing a graph that's crossing the x-axis at 2 different points. So it would have 2 x-intercepts, okay? Because they're not always just linear. They're not always just lines, right? Okay, and then for this one, we're just going to leave it blank because we don't see where x is 0, okay? All right, let's move on to the next page. This, we're just going to fill in these 3. We don't need to fill in the top. It says the following terms are also used interchangeably, which we just looked at on the other page. So the names that we could actually call the x-intercepts are roots. What else was on the other page? Solutions, okay. And what was the third one? And zeros. Okay. So we use that interchangeably. That means you might see one word or the other, okay? So what if it's written in function notation? Because this is function notation right here. Remember we learned that last class where you have f of x or g of x or h of x? All of this is called function notation. So let's recall, what's another name for f of x? Y equals. So technically this is y equals. All right, so technically we could change all of these to y equals. So if it asks you to determine the zeros, which are the x-intercepts, okay, going back to this page right here, if you're determining the x-intercepts, what is the value of y? Right here. Y equals what? 0. So what I'm going to do here is go back, and everywhere I see y, I'm going to replace it with what number do you think? 0, and then solve it for x. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, we're going to say 0 equals to 4x minus 8. 0 equals to 1/2 x plus 6. 0 equals to negative 3x minus 9. Okay, let me move this over. All right, so now I'm just ready to solve the equation for x for each one. Okay, so let's do that. We're going to add 8 to both sides. So I'll have 8 equals to 4x. And so when I divide by 4, x equals to 2. So my coordinate for the x-intercept would be 2, 0. Okay, I just did that. Solve it for x. So here we're going to subtract 6. So negative 6 equals to 1/2 x multiplied by the reciprocal of 1/2, which is 2. So negative 12 equals to x. So my coordinate would be negative 12, 0. Last one, add 9 to both sides. So 9 equals negative 3x. Divide by negative 3. So what is my value of x? Negative 3 equals x. So my coordinate is negative 3, 0. So if they give it to you in the form of an equation, this is how you would find the zeros. Okay? All right, now, I want you to take out your spirals because I'm going to erase these 3 questions and I'm going to find also the y-intercept. Okay, so not only are we going to determine the zeros, which are x's, I'm going to put up here also find the y-intercept. Okay, because you're going to need to know how to find the y-intercept when you have an equation as well. So I want to do both at the same time. All right, so you'll have to put these 3 in your spiral since you already have written on your paper. I'm just going to erase mine. Okay. All right, so same 3 problems, but this time we're going to go and find the y-intercept. All right, so this will be the y. So going back to the first thing we wrote down, if we are looking for the y-intercept, we're going to substitute x as 0. You just do the opposite. Okay, so remember this is y equals, so I'm going to say 4 times 0, because now we're replacing x with 0. Okay, so all I did was basically go through each problem, and instead of replacing y with 0, I replaced x with 0. Okay, and you know, working with 0 is actually pretty easy, because anything times 0 is 0, so you end up with y equals -8, so your coordinate is 0 and -8. This is 0, so y equals to 6. Very nice to work with 0. So 0, 6. Y equals -9, so 0, -9. All right, so now you know how to find the x-intercept for an equation. Replace y with 0, and now you know how to find the y-intercept. Replace x with 0. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at a mapping. Okay, mapping, the numbers are already there for you. So let's see if we can find, now here, you know, at the beginning, remember they only wanted us to do the x. So we're only going to do the x for 4 and 5. So what will be the x-intercept? Someone raise your hand and tell me. So if you're looking for the x-intercept, you're looking where y equals to 0 and you're reading the x. Okay, Emily? All right, 6. Very good. So the x-intercept is 6, so the coordinate would be 6, 0. Okay, and let's put x-intercept. All right, who can give me the x-intercept for number 5? Okay, go ahead.
-8, 0, and 8, 0.
Very good. There are 2 of them. -8 goes to 0 and +8 goes to 0. Okay, very good. All right, so it's very easy to see too where it's crossing the x-axis if you're looking at a graph. Okay, as long as you know which axis is x, and it actually usually points it out for you. So if this is the x-axis, it looks like it's crossing right here. It's not definitely on 1, okay, but we're going to call it 1 anyway. So we'll say x equals 1, 0. And then for this one, again, it's not directly on, what is that, -1, 2, 3. We're going to call it -3. So the x-intercept is -3, 0. Okay, they weren't really, you know, directly on it, but we'll approximate that. Okay. All right, so what you're going to do for your, let me go back to the agenda so you guys can see. So what you'll do is finish up, I think I did, what, 27, 28, and 29? Let me take a look. All right, so I did 28 and 29. So you'll finish up with 30 and 31. Okay, so it says class notes worksheet 28 to 31. So I did 28 and 29. You're finished with 30 and 31. And then those who will be looking at this tomorrow, you'll also complete pages 25 and 26. Okay, and then in class today, I'm going to let you guys finish up your domain and range activity that's going to be graded. Okay, homework is still what's on your calendar, which is worksheets 32 to 34.